when it comes to dealing with somebody like Stefan Molyneux, he is someone who's had a little bit of a pivot in his political thinking over the last couple of years, really the last 2 years. He used to be all about libertarianism, ending the state. Now he's saying a lot of things that are very pro-Donald Trump, which is, I guess, quite common in this internet age. But when you want to look at some of the comments that Stefan Molyneux has said about ending the state, I'm going to just have to push back on a lot of it. There are a lot of good libertarian ideas out there, and one of the largest ones to endorse is libertarian secessionism. Some other people that talk about this a lot are Daryl W. Perry, Matt Zwolinski. I mean, like, if you'd like to find out, here's some variety of opinions. And even myself, like, it's the concept of you take a fence, you put it around the property that you live on, and you secede from the nation, you secede from the state. That is something that can actually be put into action. When it comes to the things that Stefan Molyneux is promulgating, his brand of libertarianism is not the right answer, to be very frank. And the whole concept of someone who is saying that they want to end the state in 30 days, no, absolutely not. The biggest challenge that I would put up to libertarians is we need more connecting points in between the current state and, whatever sort of libertarian world you would like to live in. Most libertarians talk about the end goal, but they don't have enough points to get there along the line. And Stefan Molyneux has come up with some things that we're going to talk about here. But just even the concept, he put out a video about end the state in 30 days. I mean, it's the stuff like that. I mean, like, you can barely entertain it because it's just such a wild and almost silly concept. Again, excuse me for being very frank, but that's just silly. You're going to end the state in 30 days and then everything's just going to happen the way Stefan Molyneux says. No, I don't think so. And let's look at a few of the reasons why this won't work, and then let's talk about some of the libertarian things that could actually happen, because I think a lot of people listen to libertarian content online because they just want to know what are these guys saying, what is the upcoming political movement in America, and also that some people genuinely want to listen to things to challenge them. They want to know what the opposition is saying so that they just, want someone to challenge. Now, in his video about ending the state in 30 days, Stefan Molyneux was introduced by an individual. I'm not sure that guy's name, but he gave a little presentation first, and he said that he gave a story about how he was around an 8-month-old baby, and the baby said, mine, or my or mine or something like that. And this guy is saying that property rights and dominion are natural. And what the state does is the state eliminates our concept of ownership. The state eliminates, the concept of property. The state just eliminates all of these things, and we're just put into the endless transactions that are like renting, right? Well, yes and no. I mean, this is one of the things that we kind of need to be getting away from in the libertarian thinking, because once you sort of adopt that type of model, okay, let's look at this example. A baby says mine, at 8 months old, that's like the baby's first word or something. Well, it's not really yours. I mean, tell that to the baby. No, the parents bought it. They own it, it's not really yours. I mean, for an 8-month-old baby. So it's they're kind of just putting out these things that sound, really nice and metaphorical, but that's not a very legitimate example of something about how the state is eliminating ownership. What they really need to recognize is just with libertarian secessionism. Secession means you have agreements. We do have this endless system of transactions that's like renting. If you don't pay your property taxes in 3 years, then the government can, auction off your property and you no longer own it. It can be taken away from you. I mean, it's very similar with all these things. If you don't pay your taxes, you go to jail. Or if you don't pay the property taxes on your house, it can be auctioned off, right? So what you're doing with libertarian secessionism is you're saying that, hey, yeah, we have this kind of agreement, but now one party is terminating the agreement. It only takes one party to terminate an agreement. It only takes one party to break up with someone. You got a guy and a girl and they're boyfriend and girlfriend, and then she breaks up with him, and then she just says, I don't want to be with you anymore. One party is required to leave. That's what it is. That's all it is. So, like, I would say that, perhaps there is something a little more to it here. Like, it's more recognizing that we have this kind of endless transaction system where it's just a constant back and forth. Who really owns property? You could say that on the one hand, nobody owns it because it's just this endless transaction system that we have with the government. But on the other hand, to be real, where the rubber meets the road, all parties recognize you as the owner. So the government does acknowledge that you are the owner. You acknowledge that you are the owner, so that's why you have the right to put a fence around your property and say, hey, I'm terminating this agreement, and this is secession. But bear in mind, though, you probably will be faced with opposition. Now, when we come to some other things, a lot of the libertarian stuff that Stefan Molyneux talks about is not libertarian secessionism. It's not just somebody who wants to live on their little, tract of land by themselves. No, he's actually talking about creating communities and just having the world almost exactly the same way it is, just without the concept of the state, or just without, the concept of a federal government. And he's talked about this many times, about how you'd have a series of competing agencies that would kind of work things out. And he's even, in one of the videos I was watching, he was talking about how air travel would be so much faster if you eliminated the state and stuff like that. And I think libertarians just need to get away from that stuff completely. The series of competing agencies is not going to solve anything. What you're actually doing is you're going to say that you're going to have more bureaucratic issues going on, because instead of having one thing doing it, which would have been the government, now you need 5 competing agencies, and 5 of them say this, 1 say that, and then you're just going to go with the bigger group or something, and they're going to squabble it out. Now that's just more bureaucracy. So once again, if you actually adopt a libertarian secessionist model, there are no agencies, there are no planes, there's nothing other than a person on a piece of land, and that's it. So that's the stuff that the libertarians can actually be talking about. That's the stuff where you can actually sort of, eliminate the state. And if I'm a libertarian secessionist, I don't refer to that as anarcho-capitalism. For starters, libertarian secessionism is supported by subsistence, agriculture, and semi-domestication of food. It's not based on any transaction, so it's not anarcho-capitalism. And it's also not anarchy, because in reality, if you're going to be seceding from a federal government, you could view it as you would become the head of state for that particular property. And then, then you can actually have this thing that the guy's talking about with dominion, where it's the biggest thing that he fails to understand with that little baby metaphor about the baby says, mine, and it's like we have property rights ingrained in us. What you would really need to come through to that baby once they turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they start understanding language and sentences is, no, it isn't really yours. It's only yours if, you kind of terminate all the agreements and then you just agree to be in this corner of the world, and you're never going to be using the services of anything else ever again. It's like, maybe if you could actually get to some level like that. No, but what the whole reason I said that was it's meant to break the cycle. That is why you have to have libertarian secessionism. You have to break the cycle of the endless transactions that are like renting. And then you can actually have, a libertarian secessionist model. It's not anarcho-capitalism, because there is no capitalism, there is no trade, there is no economy. You could view yourself as, you would sort of be like the head of state, and you are the head of state, you're the head of everything. It's just one person on a piece of land. And yeah, one for me because I have no girlfriend. But no, that's not going to happen anytime soon. It's no accident that I come by this libertarian secessionist stuff. No, I don't think so. But I digress. So we got some other things that we want to talk about here. The ending the monopoly leads to an end of service. This is another thing from Stefan Molyneux. And Stefan Molyneux also talks about, people are afraid to end the monopoly with the government. A government is what? The government is the monopoly of force. And the way we do things in the current system is, the current paradigm of thinking in the United States of America is, we have the government. The government is our monopoly of force. How do you prove that you own a piece of property? Well, because the government is the one who adjudicates the disputes. It's like person A and person B both claim that they own this piece of land. Well, what do? They have to go to something that is supported by the government. Even if they go to a private agency in our current paradigm, that private agency has to then also get supported by the government. The government has the monopoly of force, and the only way you can sort of prove anything to the nth degree is if there is the monopoly of force who is making the decisions. What this is saying is that, or sort of like what we sort of can do instead, is just that this can be done in a much simpler way. We've talked about this before on the channel, about he who tills the soil is the owner of the land, which has been used before, to signify property rights in the nation of Niger for decades, as well as just the concept of, not to mention, we haven't even talked about the non-aggression principle. So the person who is occupying this, what we really have to recognize is, if you're all going to be obeying the non-aggression principle, then something like that wouldn't happen. But how do you get from this area how do you get from the current day and age to the libertarian world? Well, what you would have to do is, firstly, if it's going to be through just raising awareness, that's going to be done you're going to need at least 50, 60, 70, 80 years, something in that ballpark. If you're actually going to be doing this in your lifetime, within the next couple of years, what you would really have to do is kind of just get some massive fortifications going on there, or just find a place that no one's really going to touch, something like Adam Kokesh has kind of done a similar thing in Arizona, not to mention certain parts of New Mexico, and maybe even rural Wyoming would be a suitable place where you will not be disturbed by the government. And yes, I do mean that, add in a social element. We don't have to just sort of put this out in sort of black and white terms. We definitely need to add in social elements to these things. But back to the monopoly of force. Stefan Molyneux says, if you end the monopoly, then you will end the service. If you end the monopoly of force, then all services will end. But what Stefan Molyneux is saying is that people are often wrong with their predictions. I repeat, wrong with their predictions. People used to say that it was impossible to live in a world without slavery. But then after slavery, we saw all sorts of new developments in agricultural technology. John Deere, Cyrus McCormick invented the Steel Reaper, and we actually saw just a larger expansion of technological innovation post-slavery. The problem with Stefan Molyneux's thinking in that example is that would have happened anyway. It's like, are you trying to say that technology wasn't advancing? Excuse me, was slavery done only in the Stone Age or something, and then the end of slavery led to the Bronze Age or something? No, absolutely not. We had all sorts of technological advances all across the country, and it's like many people after slavery continue to work on the same plantations. Of course, the drama series Roots glorifies this. Jesse Lee Peterson also talks about growing up on a plantation in the 50s, and his family was completely descended all the way back from slavery. If they stayed there for multi-generations up to the 1950s, the same family, stayed there for many generations on the same plantation where his ancestors used to be slaves. It's like they just didn't disappear. These technological innovations would have happened anyway. So it's like, are you trying to really say that technology wouldn't have advanced if slavery had been in place? How can you prove that with absolute certainty? Well, I would just say that that's not really a genuine statement. So when we want to look at things like this, Stefan Molyneux really focuses on technology. And what he really sort of wants to incorporate is, you have sort of a rule that you're going to enforce socially, and that means just sort of about no new technology, or you can only have the oldest form of technology. It's like, and if you that would be a way that you could end the state. If we just stop, advancing this technology that gets more and more state-like and more Big Brother-like. But the problem is, if you're going to be enforcing any rule socially, and this includes the non-aggression principle, that is contingent upon all people thinking the same thing at the same time. What on earth is going on with that? And this is a big answer that I don't really think a lot of libertarians have a good response to. How do you get everybody to obey the non-aggression principle? Remember, we're talking in a world where people don't obey the non-aggression principle, and usually the responses are something like, well, if they truly respect freedom, They would obey the non-aggression principle. Yeah, but the whole problem is they aren't respecting freedom, so what do you do? Well, this is going to require a series of events that would need to lead up to this particular issue. First thing you do, you recognize that the mega banks are actually controlling the government. This is in our current day and age. The mega banks are the ones that are the largest financial entity that are ripping off the American people. You reinstate Glass-Steagall so they have fewer protections. Glass-Steagall, of course, would prevent mega banks from being treated as the same way as your personal savings bank is treated. The second thing you do, nationalize the Federal Reserve. Cut the private bankers out of the public money, because what we have is the private sector is moving the public sector to its advantage. Remember, we want libertarian secessionism for all, so it would just sort of be like everyone just has independent land and everyone just occupies their own independent area. So the first thing you have to do is eliminate the power that the megabanks are using to move the state to their advantage. Reinstate Glass-Steagall. Nationalize the Federal Reserve. The third thing you do, Department of International Security. Eliminate the threats of terrorism to the highest level possible. And the way you do this is by creating the cabinet-level Department of International Security. Put the surveillance on the outside people, not Homeland Security, inward on us, the people, on we the people. And you can use the models based on the cabinet-level Department of Peace put forth in the United States Congress by over 40 representatives. But it needs to be the International Security Department. Fourth thing you do, create a 1,000-person task force for ecological awareness. So now we have talked about getting rid of the megabanks' power so they don't move the state to its advantage, getting rid of the threats of terrorism, and the 1,000-person task force for ecological awareness is going to be all about showing respect and understanding for the earth, as well as creating, I totally want to create trial versions of this in Boundary County, Idaho, Bottineau County, North Dakota, and then we're going to sort of see if this model could actually work out. If you were just to have two people on a piece of land and just be like, have at it, okay? This is your property, this is your territory, you are 100% free. But when we want to actually sort of examine this from a practical manner, we really just need to be starting to build up communities. North Dakota and Idaho have some very prime areas for this, and it could be something very suitable and very beneficial to actually try out. What we need to do in certain counties in West Virginia, such as Logan County, Pendleton County, or McDowell County, West Virginia, they need to be the sort of test grounds for the universal basic income, but this needs to be done in the form of a voucher system, where it can be spent only on certain items, food, clothing, shelter materials, medicine, and education. We need to try that out in a place like Logan County, West Virginia. And that can sort of see, so you can sort of have kind of like a control and like a test subject. You can have the microcosm that has the more government, and then you can have one that is going to be the complete libertarian secessionist model where you are responsible for everything. You would produce your own food. You would have access to water via things like wells. We have the technology for that. And also, if you get sick, you will deal with the consequences. If you get hurt, you will deal with the consequences and assume all responsibility. And this is possible. This is possible. It would take not 30 days, absolutely not. This would take, perhaps decades to actually get to a point where we could have a rather large portion of people living just sort of on independent land. And I really think that, once again, Bottineau County, North Dakota, and Boundary County, Idaho could be the trial subjects for this, to live without a state, only have a subsistence-based agricultural and food production economy. And, that's really what it is. You're not really going to have transactions. That's one of the first and foremost things that we need to do for this particular way of thinking. It's not about community. It's not about capitalism. It's not about trading. It's about an understanding of human awareness and sort of like humanity coming full circle, where you just recognize that I'm going to be occupying this piece of land, and from this land I will get everything that will provide for me, and that will just be the end of it. I will never have to cross into somebody else's land. For starters, I know that it's wrong. I know that that's an act of aggression. And thirdly, it's like, I don't want to hurt someone else. I need to bear all the responsibility for my actions. And if I run out of food, I run out of food. If I get sick, I get sick. If, something destroys my crops, then something destroyed my crops. And I will bear 100% responsibility for all the consequences. And the way we can do that is, first, take away the power from the mega banks, make them weaker so they stop ripping off the economy and moving it to their advantage. And then we have to eliminate the threats of terrorism, and then we have to promote this level of awareness and understanding, respect and honor for the earth, so that we can actually make this into a reality. And the way we do that is reinstate Glass-Steagall, nationalize the Federal Reserve, create the Department of International Security, and then the 1,000-person task force devoted to ecological awareness. And over time, all these government agencies are just going to become obsolete slowly. We can just tick them off one by one. Education, commerce, labor. We won't need them if we're actually using this model. Everyone is just going to get slowly. It's just all going to phase out. And then we could have an actual libertarian world. Libertarian secessionism. It's the future.